This episode of the Cost of Living Abroad pod is brought to you by AUSSIE. Today we're talking to Andrew Fraser, an Aussie who traded home for Vietnam a decade ago, dabbled in startups, and then jumped headfirst into the YouTube game. He's gone viral exposing poisoned food supplies in Indonesia and India, gone undercover in the illicit shark meat trade, and he even hunted field rats and ate them in Vietnam and Thailand. His channel has exploded from 10,000 to nearly 500,000 subscribers in just 2 years, and today he reveals how he used the cost of living abroad to start a profitable YouTube channel and business after appearing on his friend Sunnyside's show, The Best Ever Food Review Show. I'm Evan.
Nice to meet you.
Welcome to the Cost of Living Abroad pod. So I'm super pumped to share your story, talk to you, and share with my audience as well. I'm so blown away by your channel because, one, I think the first time I looked at your channel on YouTube about 1.5 years or 2 years ago, you were around like 10 or 15,000 subscribers. So you're close to 400,000 or 500,000 now. Tell me about your whole YouTube journey, your journey as a documentarian, I guess.
Coming out of COVID, I didn't have a job here. And I sort of needed to do something different. And I'd always wanted to try and give YouTube a shot because of having gone on friends' channels and things like that. And so it was kind of like a perfect time to really give it a go. And I did a very similar thing. I had a pretty big chunk of change saved up, and so I was just kind of like, all right, let's just go whole hog into this again. I didn't really know what to do. I dicked around doing historical stories around items. I collect vintage watches, but watches are my hobby, and they have been a big passion for a long time. And so I thought maybe this is it. And then kind of quickly realized that this is really hard, and that it's such a small niche as well. I love that stuff. I love vintage gear in general, and I think telling the stories behind it is kind of interesting. I just don't think I was ready for it as a filmmaker or as a creator yet. It's just so much work. It's really, really tough, and it also wasn't naturally complementary to the other opportunities I had, frequently going on the Best Ever Food Review Show, which was much more food and travel focused. I think it was way more of a layup for me from an educational standpoint. Whenever I ran into an issue, just having a friend who could had so much experience that could answer that for you was massive to lean into. And then the fact that so much of the audience that knew me at that time was coming from a travel channel, It was crazy to not do something that was more travel and food focused. So it probably took me a few episodes to kind of really realize that. The COVID period in Vietnam was one of the fondest experiences I've had in my life. I loved it. It was obviously stressful at times for everyone, but there were big periods in Vietnam where you had no lockdowns at all, when the rest of the world was completely locked down because there were 0 cases. Yeah. So Vietnam also locked down, but they locked down incredibly hard and incredibly early. So we had these big, I went on massive motorbike trips twice. Yeah. I did a huge bike trip through the north with Sunny on the Hai Yang Loop. Usually it's a conveyor belt of tourists now. We had the whole place to ourselves. Yeah, that's where I really started to think about and start filming and think about getting creative. I just think, the impulse to go back to Australia definitely wasn't there. And then the way that the Vietnamese government executed it, or at least the way that it played out for people here, I think, at least if you're in Hoi An, was it couldn't have been more ideal compared to just about anything else.
Yeah. Just a quick heads up, if you're planning to work online or start a business abroad in Southeast Asia, like Andrew and I, Singapore is actually one of the best places in the world to do that, especially if you're a digital nomad, coach, consultant, or a YouTuber like either of us. That's where AUSSIE comes in. AUSSIE will help you register a legit business, set up your taxes and accounting, and stay compliant with zero stress. I use them personally for all my back-end accounting and incorporation services. Their dashboard is clean, their customer support is fast, and they make the boring stuff feel easy. Just use the QR code on screen right now or the link below in the description to get 16% off when you set up your business with AUSSIE. Whether you're freelancing or going full nomad CEO, AUSSIE makes your life simple, scalable, and legal wherever you and your business are, in Southeast Asia or the world. I think probably the first time I ever saw you on a video is, and I don't know, maybe it was filmed as 2 separate trips, but it's a massive north to south compilation motorbike tour of you and Sunny on the Best Ever Food Review Show.
I've done 2 separate motorbike trips with Sunny that are on film, on camera, and we've done many more off camera. So like, I don't know exactly which one you saw, but I mean, that's just like a huge passion of mine. And I do it much less now, but mainly for time reasons and because it is wildly unsafe. But but like, I absolutely love motorbiking in remote Vietnam. Like that Da Nang Hoi An area, like getting up into the mountains there and like hanging out with the minority tribes there. I did so much stuff with the Katu people up there, especially the Taoi. And I think it's so underexplored, like especially central Vietnam. Everyone only goes along the coast. I don't even think many people in Da Nang know that they just go like an hour into Prao and they're in this whole other world. So yeah, like doing that off camera, like massive passion of mine, loved it. Doing that with Sonny on camera, also awesome. Being able to share some of that, what we do in our like private lives, but in a much more like camera friendly way. And then I think that also naturally led into my channel as well when I finally started to see what I really loved about creating content. Most of my stuff is usually about finding a culture, and it's more about highlighting the culture than like than the main subject of the video, like the food or a making process or something like that. So yeah, and a lot of my early stuff was in that area, like getting up into the Katu tribes.
What was your original point for, I don't know what the word, for your point of contact, your point of like discovery that there was something outside of Vietnamese culture here and you wanted to learn about it, to be a part of it?
When I first came here, I did like the tourist route. I'd been up to Sapa, so I'd seen the huge Hmong communities. And then once you really start appreciating what motorbikes can do for you here, like I don't really think you've seen Vietnam until you get on a motorbike. Yeah. And again, I think that the vast majority of people who travel Vietnam see like Saigon, somewhere in the central, like Nha Trang or Da Nang. They'll see Hanoi, and then they'll either go to Sapa or Ha Long Bay, and that's it, right? And that is like such a tiny fraction of the country, and especially in the north. Like if you go, the north to me is like the jewel of Vietnam, but so are the central mountain towns. I mean, those places are absolutely magic. So, but I mean, if you go into the mountains in the north, you will just run into like one village is this ethnicity, another is another, and they will all speak Vietnamese, especially nowadays, but maybe the old people don't speak it that great. And yeah, just seeing those, like the different outfits, the different colors, the different foods, like all that stuff, I loved it. And again, I just like that feeling, like it's just, you're getting more lost, like it's more culture shock, it's more otherworldly.
We drove all the way to Phu and that for me was like definitely a crossing of a threshold into a part of Vietnam that I hadn't experienced.
Once you get into like remote Vietnam, and it's pretty novel, really. Like especially in the Philippines has so many minority cultures as well, but they're so much more assimilated. And I think Vietnam's had this like perfect. I think the roads were just not good enough for so long that they stayed so separated. And now all that's changed. But I mean, even when I first came to Vietnam, like you literally had to go by train to Sapa because the roads just weren't doable, or they just took so damn long. So that overnight to train thing, which is still popular, was the only way you could really realistically get there. And so that wasn't that long ago. Now, like the roads everywhere are just so good. So I think it's going to break down. I do think that like most of those minority cultures will assimilate now quite quickly. The young people are quite like that, which is quite sad. But then also maybe there's like the development side of things, and those communities, there's a lot more opportunity for them as well. But yeah, it was like, I think it's like a perfect culture for that. Like the fact that there are so many different like individual niches that you can see and explore, and that are still so distinctly different. Cambodia's not like that. Laos has a lot of Hmong people, but other than that, not really. Thailand is a little bit in the north, but again, largely assimilated, I think.
Okay, let's dive into some of the sort of like weirder, what the fuck kind of things you've seen done on camera, like classic like eating experiences on the Best Ever Food Review show, but then also I think recently on your channel you've been doing some incredible thing. I'm very curious about some of your more recent projects, like the one we went to Indonesia and we're in the tofu factories where they're burning plastics, and like seems like a bit of a different branch out into a more like investigative or like intense kind of journalism. So what's your interest in that? How does that sort of story, where does it come from?
I mean, none of that is deliberate, like at all. Like if it does come across as more investigative or anything like that, that's not my intent. It's like I genuinely, I mean, most of my ideas, I search, I usually try and find like a really shocking or jarring image. Something that makes me think like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah.
Or something like this, you know? And so when I go to a country, I will find 4 or 5 of those and be like, all right, these are the stories that I'm going to tell. And I will research them to every extent possible about what I'm going to find. But I find that like without fail, whatever you come across on the ground is not that, and you have to change the story.
Let's get behind the scenes a bit then. Map out your timeline of a project, and either broadly or picking an example.
Yeah, so it takes me like basically, it takes a full month to research and plan a trip. So usually I try and find and I have 2 full-time producers now. So it's like, we have to find and get contacts at those 4 or 5 crazy ass ideas and find out as much detailed information as I can. And there's varying levels of how detailed you can get. Again, in that tofu instance at all, we didn't even think we were going to be able to film in the village at all. So, sometimes you're like, all right, well, let's put a morning aside and maybe we can do it. And then you have to, of course, be able to pivot on the day. But yeah, typically it takes like a month to plan, put everything together, and then I try to shoot everything within 10 days. That's usually not that possible, so maybe it bleeds over a little bit, but essentially that's how it works. And the idea is that by the time I come back, the next shoot is kind of like underway. And obviously this is where I'm at now. Like originally I had to plan and shoot and do a lot of the pre-production myself. So it was a lot harder, but that's generally the idea. But the tofu example specifically, I just seen these crazy images of entire Indonesian villages that just with mountains of trash and cooking tofu right next to it and burning it right there. And I was just like, I gotta see this. This can't be real. And then I rocked up at the village and they just welcomed me in, man. And I was really clear to everyone. I had big cameras, I had whatever else, and I tried the tofu and I just found that I could walk factory to factory and shoot as much as I wanted, and no one really gave me any mind. And it was kind of, it was
that's sort of phenomenal. And it's so in other words, you had no fixer on the ground.
I did. So but that's why we thought we couldn't shoot that.
Oh, okay.
So I had a fixer on the ground who knew the location, who found the location for me, and that we'd scouted the area. There was a village that had caused the biggest stir maybe 5 or 6 years ago because they had been, it was like a plastic sorting village, and a lot of the village trash that they were sorting was imported. And so it was widely condemned, this importation of Western trash. And then the whole village was just people sorting on their backyard and there was trash everywhere. That's what I thought the story was going to be. Along the way, we'd seen photos of the tofu village and I said, hey, if possible, we need to film this. And the word from the fixer on the ground was, there's no way that's possible.
Yeah.
And so yes, I had a fixer who thought that it wasn't possible. And we just stopped on the way and lo and behold, I could get as much access as I wanted, really.
Another classic is sharks, the shark video. So I thought your take on the shark thing is interesting. In this case, it was a village that's going, what's the way, nose to tail, right? They're doing nose to tail shark processing.
Yeah.
So tell me about how that story developed and the experience of going there and shooting it and everything.
So that's in Lombok. Again, same thing. I'd actually gone there to shoot the Nyale Worm Festival, which is the sea worms that pop out and explode and you can eat them. And that was just a nightmare to film, and filming at night. And we were shooting a lobster thing there as well. And then the sharks. And the sharks were a nightmare, an absolute nightmare, because the boats only come in on certain days. They go out for 14, 15 days at a time, so you have no idea whether you can or can't film it. It's obviously incredibly sensitive. No one wants you there for obvious reasons. And yeah, so I don't know, but I got lucky on one morning when I went there, they had the sharks, and I don't try to plan out my storyline or what I'm going to think. So really I just shoot whatever it is in there and capture what I genuinely think of the story. I take notes as I go, and then I rewatch the footage as I write my voiceover script, and whatever the opinion is that I share at that time was hopefully was what I came to whilst I was there and the way it felt. And when I was there, and what it genuinely felt like was, I was talking to these guys at the Shark Smokery. They'd been doing it for 70 years. It was a genuine culture there. It was a genuine thing.
Yeah.
I didn't get the vibe that this was actually like, I mean, maybe there was shark fin fishing back then at the time as well, and that maybe that started all off, but I really got the vibe that this has become a big part of Lombok's culture and that it should exist with or without it. And I just got to believe that there's some sustainable way to make a shark fin fishery. It might have more limits. It probably almost definitely involves like stricter regulation about which species they do keep, because there's definitely none of that. I mean, I saw manta rays getting ripped out, and there's all kinds of stuff. But again, the overwhelming feeling that I got was not that it was like that this was something that should be entirely shut down. I just think that there has to be a way to regulate some of the more sustainable shark species. I know it's probably controversial, but that genuinely was the feeling I got when I was there.
That's interesting. That makes me think of both Inuit people in northern Canada, but also in Iceland, two beautiful, stunning, incredible places with their own incredible, unique cultures.
Yeah.
And both of them have, you know, sort of time immemorial traditions of whaling, right? And a whaling that is totally different than the sort of Japanese mega whaler ship that you see on TV, and that is what's so reactionary, I think. I guess in Canada, there are certainly specific regulations for Indigenous people versus like commercial fisheries.
Yeah, and I get the same vibe, like honestly, like, and I would love to shoot, same thing they have in Indonesia, like I would love to try and shoot the whaling that they do there as well, the small scale whaling. But I don't know, it's probably a personal bias on mine. I am typically more in favor of preserving a culture. So it's like of like a human culture. And again, maybe that comes with very heavy regulation, maybe that comes with very heavy limits on how many can be harvested and whatnot. I ate dugong in Australia with Aboriginal people on Sunny's channel. I've eaten green turtle, which is completely illegal for Australians outside of certain contexts. And same thing, there's legal loopholes that are put in place to preserve certain cultures, and I'm like all in favor of that stuff.
So I've eaten dog here in Hanoi on multiple occasions, and I've eaten dog in Pleiku, and I actually grew up a vegetarian. So my parents are like intense vegans or PETA people, and I don't know whether you were or not, but certainly part of my travels abroad, I used to work in restaurants. I was influenced by the whole Anthony Bourdain thing and his sort of philosophies and ideas, and to me, when it came down to it in the moment, it was that, right? It was just like uncles handing me food, handing me drink, and me thinking, what could be more rude as a foreigner, as a guest, than to reject these people's food and reject their drink, right? Just like I couldn't imagine anything more, just that, anything literally more rude, literally more of a like rejection of who they were than to be like, turn my nose up at them and be like, sorry, I'm actually disgusted by your food, so I can't touch it. And this isn't like anything special. We're talking about like a Bia Hoi on the corner, right? Yeah. I'm curious about that aspect of it, the food and how the food ties into culture.
Like, I think it's a natural hook. It gives you a subject. And I also think that, like, and then food is just so inherently linked with culture, which again is the main thing I want to explore. So it's like, without that, I find that it's like hard to get that prism into that world. Like, how and why do you do this thing? And then everything else kind of opens up. So it's like, I think without the food, it would be very hard to do. Although, again, I've done a lot now on cultural objects. I've done a lot on knives that do really well. And then in many ways, there's a kind of a similar thing. You're an object that has this whole cultural array around it, and there's a making process. So it's like, if I have those ingredients, I can usually make the story. And so, yes, I guess that's like why the food. And also I find like I guess I'm naturally drawn to more extreme foods or more bizarre foods because again they lead to more unusual or more out there cultures, which is also what I'm after. And I'm fascinated by the fact that no matter how extreme the food is, even if I can't actually enjoy it at the time because there's too much of a mental block, usually I can at least see why this is in the culture, like why, like something clicks. Like a really good example is bamboo worms. No, sorry, not bamboo worms, coconut worms. The big ones with like giant mandibles. Oh man, they're huge in Vietnamese film. You'll find them in Saigon at a lot of the beer hoes around here. Oh man, all right, you got to look up these things. So they're huge grubs. They're like the size of my thumb. You have to rip off their heads before you eat them because they will literally punch a hole straight through your stomach. So and they are like one of the hardest things to eat, even to this day, after eating all kinds of crazy stuff, because they're so big, so strong, and like they pulsate in your chopsticks, and they're alive. Eating live stuff is really hard.
Yeah.
And so you just have the whole combination: gnarly looking creature, danger, it's pulsating, everything. But the craziest bit is like if you can actually man up and force yourself to eat it, it is you instantly get it. It's like, it explodes, it has this coconut creamy flavor. Like it is, if you could force yourself to be purely objective, you would have to agree that it tastes good. It's not possible because of everything else, because you can't unsee the mandibles, because you can't like undo the emotions. And I asked Peter from Angang, a Michelin star chef, like he cooked it for me at the end of the episode that we did on it, and I said, I said to him, like, Peter, like, why do you have coconut worms on the menu? And I thought he'd give me some like big spiel about how it was like Vietnamese culture and all this shit, and he just said, because they taste good.
Yeah.
And it's like, and so yeah, there's often like a really like simplistic answer, but yeah, I don't know, I'm fascinated that usually no matter how crazy it is, it kind of makes sense.
I get that. I think, and for me, the hardest thing I ever ate is the live things, those octopuses and sole that like climb around your face. I literally found it difficult to eat. Like again,
I don't think yeah, that would be really tough. I've done live squid, but octopus would be.
They're very. They're difficult to eat. They literally like start crawling out of your mouth, even after they die. When you've killed them by biting through them, they continue to like move around your fucking face.
Yeah, that sounds.
But the flip side for that is, it was an interesting experience because you're smack dab in the heart of the most modern, beautiful 21st century city. Yeah. I was going to Seoul on a trip coming back and forth between Canada and Vietnam, and Seoul felt more modern than my hometown, Toronto.
Course, right?
Way cleaner, way nicer.
Yeah.
Certainly in a different kind of developmental state than Vietnam.
Yep.
But here's this tradition, that's clearly like deeply rooted in something Korean, right? Some Korean past and culture and history that by preserving the food tradition, they preserved who they are, right? And again, I don't know that there's a way to say that, but it's so clear that that's an illustrative of that point.
I think it's something about like really modern places that still have a cultural food. Like I've always thought about if and when and how I would do dog. I've never eaten dog, and doing it on camera would be interesting. And like there's the extremes, right? There's the whole like, there's the hill tribes that still do it, and then there's like countries like Seoul and Korea, right? Like it's crazy that that's still like a thing there. And so both those angles are like fascinating. Again, I'm not sure I'd ever do it.
Whatever. I grew up in the West. I had a pet dog. I had pet cats. I think I've watched you not only eat rat, but seemingly really enjoy it. That one by wonder, you got into the Mekong rat. I lived in New York and San Francisco. I lived in some rat-infested cities. The other day, I picked one up off of my front lawn in Da Nang. It was at least the size of my quadriceps. So, okay, tell me about this. For a cultural artifact, are you holding or are you smelling the guy's smoked dead foot? So that's about as, because this is a beyond a next level of cultural taboo, right? You're faced with a human foot. It smells like beef jerky.
I both held and smelled his foot, and another guy's like just basically like soaked in alcohol severed arm, and that was like even harder, to be honest, because he was like much rawer for him. It was much fresher. Like he was still like very much emotionally attached to his arm.
You can probably still feel it.
I don't know. It was like, those are some kind of like, there are definitely some moments where I'm shooting where you got to catch yourself and just feel like, man, this is such a surreal experience. Yeah. And that's an extreme belief. Like, there's now I can't even remember the. Yeah, so tell us about it for the viewers. So it's the idea is that they're going to be reconnected to their body after burial, right? Or like an afterlife. And I think, is it man, I can't remember now. People are going to kill me for this, but I believe it's the Thai people.
Yeah, we can edit out anything you want, obviously.
But they essentially believe that if they lose a limb whilst they're alive, that they need to be buried with it in order to be whole once again in the afterlife. So they usually, historically, and like losing limbs may be more common in Vietnam because of the war and whatnot as well in the past, right? And a lot of UXOs. So it's actually like it's a thing there. And so typically the way all these like minority cultures work, especially in the north, is they have a fire running 24/7 in the center of their homes, and that's how they preserve stuff because they don't have refrigeration. So if they lose a limb, it just makes sense. They hang up that limb with everything else, along with the meat, the chicken, the tea that they're saving for later in the week. And so you just have like a human foot or a human arm like hanging above the fire pit. And nowadays they do add in like a couple more steps, like they soak it in alcohol as well and then smoke it. So I've sort of seen it at various different stages. But yeah, it was again looking for the more out there extreme cultures that I could find. Coming across that, as soon as I saw a photo, I was like, I got on the next flight. I was like, yeah, take me there.
What's something I didn't ask you that I should have asked, or that maybe you came in here expecting to talk about a story you wanted to share that we didn't get to?
I'm passionate in general about like Southeast Asia. Like I think Bangkok is one of my favorite cities because it's just like this. It's like this perfect melting pot city. And Thailand seems totally different from Bangkok itself. Like Bangkok just feels like its own beast. It's this total melting pot. You go on the subway, you hear all these different languages, all these different like cultures, this thing. And I think Hong Kong at least had that. I don't know if it still does, so it'd be interesting. And I think in a way, those kind of cities like Hong Kong and like Bangkok are able to capture that in a non-sterile way that somewhere like Singapore does. Like whenever I visit Singapore, has like the core of that, and some of the sort of like the smaller suburbs have their own vibe like that, like Little India and stuff. But I don't know, for whatever reason, it doesn't have the charm to me of somewhere like Bangkok does. And I will say, like, even though now I'm like an entirely based around Vietnam guy, I travel so much now, like my favorite country tends to shift a lot. I increasingly really love like the Philippines and Indonesia. And so it's odd how those things happen. Maybe you become like overly saturated with a certain place, or you just like you really begin to appreciate more of these other places. But yeah, I think like nowadays, like I think if I were to redo this whole like expat journey thing, maybe I'd choose Indonesia, maybe I'd choose Philippines. I think they're both like amazing cultures. Cambodia now is like really in its kind of like heyday for me. Like when I first visited way back when, I sort of saw Cambodia as depressing. Like it seemed like it had no future. They'd killed off their whole educated class. It felt like the economy was in the drain. It was so poor, it was so impoverished. And now it's much more Chinese influence, but it kind of, I see that insane growth that I felt when I first visited Vietnam. If someone's like out there like thinking about life in Southeast Asia, I'd advise them to do the same sort of thing I did. It's like, come here and see what vibes with you. Because again, like, I don't know if I came here now, if I would still choose Vietnam. Because it just has to mash with where you're at in life at the time. Bourdain always had this judges a place by how soon he starts talking himself into like, oh, I could live here. I like never had that about Cambodia, ever. But then on recent shoot trips there, I get it hard. Like, it just has this perfect magic of, I think what you're talking about, of this, like, finally there's some momentum. It doesn't feel all that depressing anymore. But you still have the crazy wild side, right? Yeah. So it's like, it's a real nice cocktail. I really like that place. Like if I had friends moving here now, I would be like, I think the number one spot I'd still say to people is Da Nang. I still think Da Nang is maybe the perfect Southeast Asian. I mean, to me, it has just about everything. Like great hospitals, world-class airport, beaches right there. There's no traffic like there is everywhere else in Vietnam. Yeah. But again, like I think Phnom Penh, again, especially with the airport, especially with the new airport as well. Like Phnom Penh also has this US dollar thing. Like it's kind of like a really nice mix. If you're not that kind of person that just kind of wants a bit more modern of a lifestyle. Again, if you want like really everything seems almost like the West with cheaper costs, then maybe Thailand's still the one, or Kuala Lumpur.
I think Da Nang will be unrecognizable in a decade.
Especially now that they've expanded it to take over
Quang Nam and like everything merged.
Right.
Yeah,
so it's like a giant district now.
Yes.
And again, when I first moved here, like the premier beach town was Nha Trang, but it's very much not now. Like, well, maybe it's like 50-50 now, but at least the one with the momentum is Da Nang.
No, it's Da Nang.
So, but yeah, I mean, I think, if it weren't for hiring, if you don't have to hire locals, then like, I think that's maybe the only drawback.
Decision to come to Ho Chi Minh, yeah, I guess for business reasons, right? For HR and hiring.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like the Saigon has all the universities, like no matter where you live in Vietnam, like there are universities in Nha Trang, Da Nang, whatever, but a lot of kids from rural towns will go to the big cities, Hanoi or Saigon. And so it's like they're natural hiring hubs. I find the English is way better here than it is in central Vietnam. And I especially something that's kind of niche, like video editing, which was mainly what I was hiring for at the time. That was like impossible to find. So I did have one. I mean, my first editor, who is still with me, was from Da Nang. So, but it was finding subsequent ones, so it was impossible. So, and here it's still hard. Like hiring's always hard, I guess, for different businesses. But I find it Much easier here. I mean, and you're not asking people to. There, I kept finding that I'd get applicants that you were having to ask to move, and that's tough because again, it's just Da Nang is much more of a international businesses are moving there, foreigners are moving there. Locals still think it's like Niue. They don't want to be moving back to the countryside. You go the other way, right? So it's like I don't think it's really growing domestically.
Tell me, what does your production team look like here in Saigon and Ho Chi Minh?
It's like I always hated being on camera. Like I mean, so much of my stuff, especially early on, was like close to pure voiceover. Right? Like I just was really uncomfortable with it. That's why I still do so much voiceover because it just became a style. Right? So I was uncomfortable with being in front of camera. And then I was definitely uncomfortable putting anything out that resembled like a low effort vlog. So I had to make it feel like it was something. So it was more that I was just shit at it. And the only way I could feel comfortable with publishing something was by over polishing it. Right? And so now it's kind of become a thing. But now I have 2 editors, 2 producers. And it's like a small gather. I try to do it like $1,000 an episode, at least for international shoots. And it might sound like a lot of money. That's like really hard. That's like by the time, especially if I'm flying a camera guy. So it's like, so I should say, like, so some of the stuff I solo shoot, some of the stuff I shoot with a camera guy. Usually I bring a camera guy with me. And so by the time you're like double flights, double hotels, if you need a fixer, it gets quite tricky to do something under $1,000 an episode. So yeah, I think that might sound like a lot. That's like nothing for if you want to do something polish-wise. So, and I've explored trying to do things solo shot. And they do just as well. I mean, some of my tofu episode I shot entirely myself, and that has 3 million views. You know, so it's not like necessarily you're going to get any more views by taking that second camera guy. But frequently I regret it. Frequently I find something that I'm like, I'm never going to be able to shoot that again. It was so special, or it was an event, it needed another angle or whatever. I find that it's usually worth sacrificing. And yeah, it's hard. You never know. If you ever. I'm still not at the stage where I can like just bank profits every trip or do whatever. I still have good months and bad months, and the good ones have to pay for the bad ones.
So are you AdSense funded then?
100%.
And one more thing. If you also want to turn your experience in Southeast Asia into a real profitable business, scan this QR code on the screen or use the link in the description below to sign up for incorporation and accounting services with AUSSIE in Singapore right now.